This song is called Granny's Thanksgiving Elf, and it's about a granny and an elf. But Granny is not the name of the elf, that's just the name of the song. That's why I call the song Granny's Thanksgiving Elf. This all started a Thanksgiving or two ago, that is to say, a year or two ago on a Thanksgiving. I can't be sure, we drank a lot that year. Well, the in-laws and my assorted family arrived, and the kids ran around them in circles, and we turned the 50-inch TV on and put some Christmas movies on for the kids, while the adults had some adult holiday punch, if you know what I mean. Well, we got to talking about the movies, and my mother-in-law started talking about an elf. She couldn't remember the name of the movie or the name of the elf, but that didn't stop her from giving that old elf a name. I can't quite recall the name she gave that old elf, but I can assure you it was totally inappropriate to say in front of children. And so began the story of Granny's Thanksgiving Elf. Well, me and my brother decided to make a drink we saw once in a Jerry Lewis movie. It had all manner of spirits that don't mix well and, quite frankly, weren't fit for human consumption. After scrounging around in the basement for some of the ingredients for this drink, we mixed this cocktail that wasn't fit for human consumption. And we humanly consumed it. Well, Granny was still trying to remember this particular Christmas movie, and I'm still trying to recall the inappropriate name she gave this elf. Well, me and my brother decided this elf wasn't funny anymore, and Granny had to go. After listening to that old Arlo Guthreys song, the only plan that made any sense was to leave Granny at the city dump. Well, we ran this plan across Grandpappy Jeff, and he was fine with it. As long as the football game was on, it's Thanksgiving after all, and I asked old Grandpappy Jeff if he wanted a beer before we left, and he said no worries. So I left Grandpappy Jeff to watch his game, and I got my brother, and we went about loading Granny in that truck. It was a lot easier getting Granny in that old truck than we thought. We just told her there were more grandbabies at the dump. So we drove all the way out there only to find out that the dump is closed on Thanksgiving. We were panicking for a bit when we saw someone else's Granny running wild and free in the cornfield next to the dump. Looks like someone else had heard old Arlo's song and had the same idea of leaving Granny at the dump. Well, that old Granny was looking pretty cold out there, and we had a change of heart, so we picked up that other Granny and we took her with us. Well, we got back to the Thanksgiving festivities not long after, and we quickly apologized for leaving with one Granny and coming back with two. As it turns out, when Grandpappy Jeff told us no worries when we left, he was talking about a microbrewery. Now, this is not a paid endorsement, but that no worries beer is delicious. Poor Grandpappy had been watching the game for near an hour, expecting we were going to bring him a frosty beer. Now, friends, we got to drinking again, and that stray Granny got into the trash, looking for some stray grandbabies, I suppose, and suddenly I remember Granny's inappropriately named elf. Well, we couldn't quite recall what that inappropriately named elf was inappropriately named. It was something like Banger Wanger. Well, I said Banger Wanger out loud, and we laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed. After that much of the Thanksgiving spirit, just about anything would have been hilarious. But we weren't quite finished with Granny's Thanksgiving elf yet. That elf needed a first name, so we named him Dong. That's D-O-N-G, not Don as in Donald. And the middle name Cornelius, because it sounded like it belonged there. And so Granny's elf had a name, Dong Cornelius Bangerwanger. Now, Senior Dong Cornelius Bangerwanger was just about the funniest name we'd ever heard. I laughed so hard I nearly threw up the Thanksgiving spirit right there on the kitchen floor. When from the living room I hear a little grandbaby voice repeat after me, Senior Dong Cornelius Bangerwanger. Turns out all those kids in the other room hadn't been put to bed yet like I thought. Turns out it was only 3 p.m. in the afternoon. Hadn't even eaten Thanksgiving dinner yet. Well, those kids thought Granny's Thanksgiving elf was just about the funniest thing they ever heard. Can't figure out why they thought it was so funny. They're not allowed to drink yet. But there we were just the same. A kitchen full of kindergartners chanting Banger Wanger. Well, my wife wasn't too happy, as you can imagine. Not because the kids were shouting Banger Wanger. No, she's got a sense of humor. No, apparently I was supposed to be cooking the turkey the whole time I was picking up stray grannies in a cornfield. I got to work and I cooked that bird in record time. It was a real Thanksgiving miracle. We ate and ate some more. We had turkey and stuffing and potatoes, sweet and otherwise. The kids put ketchup on everything, then refused to eat because the different foods were touching. We had cakes and pies and coffee and then went right back to drinking all manner of Thanksgiving spirit. Well, we put on some Christmas music, and as you can imagine, things got rowdy and the dancing started. We knew we had gone too far when a 3-year-old started twerking next to the kitchen table. As you can imagine, my wife was not too happy. Not because a 3-year-old was twerking in the corner. My wife has a sense of humor. No, I had passed out on the toilet and left her alone with my mother for an extended amount of time. Well, I heard my wife calling and I jumped up like a jackrabbit. I tell you, I was sober as a church mouse and I flew out of that bathroom like a bird. I was practically a whole zoo of animals. I broke up the whole party, and my wife took the kids upstairs for bath time, and I sent my parents and my in-laws on their way, and I called an Uber for that stray granny. Slipped the driver a $5, told them to show her a good time, and they took off into the night. I still imagine that granny running wild and free in a cornfield, searching for feral grandbabies to this very day. Well, if you recall, I'm sober as a church mouse by this point, and can't have that on Thanksgiving, or as a Thanksgiving spirit. The kids are finally in bed, so me and my wife and my brother start the after party. imagine, a few drinks in, we start talking about Granny's famous Thanksgiving elf. We found the movie, by the way. The elf's name was Belsnickel. I can't quite recall the inappropriate name Granny had inappropriately named him. Definitely something involving genitalia. But now the legend of Senor Dong Bangerwanger, that's D-O-N-G, by the way. No, it was too late for poor Belsnickel. Senor Dong Cornelius Bangerwanger was now his own elf, with his own elf hopes and elf dreams. Senor Dong Bangerwanger was now a sophisticated gentleman elf of the world. That's how he gained the title of senior, after all. Spreading Thanksgiving cheer across Europe, I suppose. By now I had regained the Thanksgiving spirit, if you know what I mean. We had made some blue Hawaiians. That's kind of like a pina colada, except with blue curacao or curacao, depending on which movie you originally heard that in. I won't judge your character based on your pronunciation difficulties. We generously mixed in some cranberry sauce in these blue Hawaiians. Really captured the spirit of Thanksgiving there. Sort of a purple Hawaiian, I suppose. It's at about this point I became a sad drunk. I didn't want the legend of Granny's Thanksgiving elf to slip into the cold night to be forgotten. Like some sort of stray cornfield granny. So I made a grand proclamation, as one does after a few purple Hawaiians. Someday, when I shuffle off my mortal coil, I would like to commemorate Senor Bangerwanger on my tombstone, I said, for all eternity. Now, as you can imagine, my wife wasn't too happy. Not about putting Senor Don Cornelius Bangerwanger on my tombstone. That's D-O-N-G, remember? No, as previously stated, my wife has a sense of humor. No, she was upset she hadn't recorded my proclamation so she could share it on her various social media platforms. Well, as you can imagine, my brother, being such a good brother, propped me back up on the couch. I had been on the floor for several minutes at this point. That's where you belong after a few purple Hawaiians. My wife got out her iPhone, and I try not to judge your character based on your phone choice. Well, she got her phone out and began recording me for posterity. I did my best to balance perfectly on a perfectly stationary sofa. And so my wife recorded and recorded and recorded some more. My friends, I told the whole story. Elves, turkey, grannies, beer, purple Hawaiians, and all. The same story I'm telling you right now. It was quite a tale. And when I was done, it was quite late, so my brother passed out in the guest room, and my wife managed to get me to bed, and we managed to get to sleep without any more incident. Well, the next morning we were rudely awakened at 6 a.m., and when I say rude, I mean rude. Kids weren't even awake yet. Someone was vigorously knocking at our front door. Well, friends, I hopped up like a jackrabbit, sober as a church mouse, and flew down the stairs like a bird, and at the front door was the boys in blue, sirens and flashing lights and all, and well, I opened the door and asked the officer what all the fuss was about. He kindly asked if I was missing anything. And surely I was. I was missing most of my memories from Thanksgiving. Purple Hawaiians will do that to you. Well, the cop says, you missing anything like a granny? You can imagine my confusion. That old officer went on to explain they found this granny rooting through a dumpster. She was looking for loose grandbabies, I suppose, and those cops tracked down an Uber driver who had bought that stray granny an ice cream cone, trying to show her a good time, I guess. And so that officer asked me again if I was missing any grannies. Now, friends, I was in a real panic. I couldn't remember Thanksgiving at all. Well, I jumped on my phone and I texted my mother and my mother-in-law, and by the grace of God, they both figured out how to text me back in a timely manner. I can't tell you how relieved I was. Like a ton of bricks, it fell off my shoulders. Well, I looked up at that kindly officer and I told him, no, all my grannies are accounted for, and he thanked me for my time and left. Took all the lights and sirens with him, and I went back to bed. It's now firmly the day after Thanksgiving, and the kids are awake and running around, and my wife asked me what all the commotion was this morning. I told my wife about a dumpster granny, and as you can imagine, she wasn't too happy. Not about the dumpster granny. No, she's got a sense of humor. No, she could not believe that I had forgotten all about the previous day. Well, I sat down and I watched a video on her phone telling the story. I'm telling you folks right now. I asked her kindly if she had posted this to social media and the cops could trace that granny back to me, and well, she hadn't yet. It was a real Thanksgiving miracle. Granny's Thanksgiving elf, Senior Don Cornelius Bangerwanger, had performed some Thanksgiving magic and saved me. He saved me. So instead of commemorating Banger Wanger on my tombstone for all eternity, posting that video on social media, I wrote this song so the children can hear the tale of Granny's Thanksgiving elf. I may have to change a few parts for convenience, but one thing is true. I will always be grateful and never forget the magical elf named Senior Don Cornelius Bangerwanger.
Granny's Thanksgiving elf.
Thanksgiving elf. Thanksgiving elf.
Say his name twice a day for some good health.
For some good health. For some good health.
When those drinks hit you like a hammer.
Hit you like a
Hit you like a
hammer.
You got a friend in an elf named Banger Wanger.
Named Banger Wanger. Banger Wanger.
Granny's Thanksgiving elf.
Thanksgiving elf. Thanksgiving elf.
On that magic day, he saved me from myself.
Saved me from myself. Saved me from myself.
When you lost a bit of your swagger.
Lost a bit of swagger. Lost some swagger.
Just call Senior Don Cornelius Banger Wanger.